Now we go live to New York City, the Big Apple, and talk to one of my favorites, a guy that is always outspoken. He's honest, transparent, and he tells it the way it is. One of the best from MLSsoccer.com, Simon Borg. Simon, welcome, my friend.
Anthony, always a pleasure. Thanks for having me. I haven't spoken to you since the start of the World Cup. Was it a good World Cup for you?
Well, I think some of my predictions were good. If you recall, I decided to go with USA and Germany out of that group, and two out of that group made it out, and one is World Cup champions. Let's start with that, Simon. To me, let's talk about the success of Team USA and Jurgen Klinsmann opening the eyes of so many across the world. And now you see DeAndre Yedlin in high demand in Europe. You see Matt Besler, on and on. How great is this now for the youth clubs in America?
Well, look, it's great on the youth front. DeAndre Yedlin being a homegrown product, going to the World Cup, showing no fear at all, going up against the likes of Ronaldo in Portugal, and then Belgium there. Clearly, he has now put himself on the map. You're hearing clubs connected with him that you wouldn't imagine, from Liverpool to Roma, Genoa. I mean, Bayern Munich is even a club that's been mentioned lately. So he's put himself on the map. Just goes to show you what a stage the World Cup is. And overall, with the performance, it's interesting, Anthony. Depending on whom you speak to, there are people who are thrilled with what the U.S. was able to do, and remember, they were a kick away from maybe eliminating Belgium there. Chris Wondolowski had that chance in the closing stages of that round of 16 match. But then there are others who say, you know what, it was maybe a little too defensive. We wish the U.S. could have been better. So there are two camps, depending on who you speak to, at least here in the United States.
To me, Simon, I think what they lacked, let's go back to that Portugal game, is a little, I'll say, street smarts, soccer smarts. Late in that game, that collapse to me was really something I can never forgive the USA team for giving up that goal against Portugal. People have destroyed Bradley on Twitter for that. But I got to tell you, to me, there was a lot of problems in that lead-up goal. Wondolowski also could have eaten up some time in that corner flag area. Your thoughts on that?
Absolutely, Anthony. And I feel worse for the U.S. fans who went all the way to Manaus, in the jungle, not the easiest of trips, and they had to leave that place with that bad taste in their mouth. I feel bad for them. But you got to go straight to the coach, in my opinion. Afterwards, we dissected the video, and you see Jurgen Klinsmann just moments before that turnover, pushing his guys, telling them to move, to advance. I thought originally he was telling his guys to sit back. No, he was telling them to move up. How do you do that at the end of a game against Portugal? So, look, it was encouraged by the coach, and look, it's part of his proactive style, his proactive way of thinking of how the game should be played. But I agree with you. Naive soccer in the last moments of a game where you need the point.
And the last game I wanted to comment on was that Belgium game. We saw that sitter, the Wondolowski miss. That's fine. But to me, how in the world does Beckerman not see the time he has been earned in that World Cup playing so well in a big game against Belgium? What happened there, Simon?
Well, look, I know a lot of people were against that decision, but I actually support it in this respect. If you know going into that game against Belgium that you're going to play a defensive kind of game, and you're going to be tracking the likes of the athletes that Belgium have, I think that it was maybe the right decision. I mean, to have Beckerman track Marouane Fellaini as opposed to Jeff Cameron, and by the way, that was Jeff Cameron's major responsibility. You want Cameron in that spot. So I agree that maybe Beckerman there would have meant more possession, more spells where you're controlling the game a little, because they were under the gun the entire match. But then the trade-off is who's going to be able to track runners. Beckerman, at his age, that's not his strength. He's not an athletic player. He depends on positioning, and I don't think that would have been enough against the type of talent and athletes that Belgium has.
Simon, I come away with three things from this World Cup. Concacaf Nations have put the rest of the world on alert that they're for real. They're not going to be pushovers anymore. And I have gone on record. I said this about a year ago. I believe that in the next two World Cups, one CONCACAF nation will rise the cup, the World Cup. I am not, high on anything. I'm not drunk. I truly believe that, Simon. That's one. Two, we see that now the soccer world has gotten smaller. Brazil, Portugal, Spain, Italy, and England all on the beach with margaritas, and some of the smaller nations continue to play on in the knockout stages. And the last thing is simply this. We have seen a World Cup being held in Brazil, where we were always told about all the other issues and we saw nothing. A lot of issues always thrown at FIFA, but I got to congratulate them in Brazil for doing a wonderful job. Comment on those three things, please.
Yeah, and most of all, Anthony, the second point you made. I could concur with you on that one. The second point of the fact that the soccer world is getting smaller. That's my takeaway from this, aside from the fact that I thought James Rodriguez was a superstar. I mean, Anthony, we live to see players like James Rodriguez, and I might sound like I'm coming across as Colombian here, but it was such a pleasure to watch him and to see another one of those Diego Maradona-type talents rise up, a Roberto Baggio type. It's just beautiful to see. But on your point about it's evening out. The World Cup, World Soccer is evening out. It's leveling out because we're watching soccer from all over the world. People there are no new tricks. We're getting out enough. Smaller countries are facing bigger countries more and more often, whether in friendlies or in real competition. Then you have coaches exporting, and you have players obviously moving more so than they ever have. I mean, you have whether it's an Egyptian player playing for Chelsea. I mean, you go across the teams, and you have players from countries not associated with being big powers, and they're playing for major clubs. So all that globalization is really making for teams that are competitive, and they're not just minnows that are sitting back and hoping. They are actually going out there with a game plan and playing and going toe-to-toe. And I think you saw that in the World Cup, and I agree with you. That's a major takeaway, and it starts with the Concacaf Nations. I mean, what I saw Costa Rica do in that World Cup, tactically, it was such a master plan. I mean, they left the World Cup without losing a game, and it was genius by their coach. And you want to see more teams, because it's the tactical side, Anthony, you know it, that really evens things out. If you know what you're doing tactically, you can play. If you have a good 11 players, you can go head-to-head against anyone.
Simon, I don't know about you, but every time we see a new World Cup winner, Germany deservedly so, before that Spain, and before that Italy, every other country in the world now, it's like the flavor of the month. They want their coaches to come from these countries, or they want to mold their game after these countries. I think that's hogwash, to be honest. I think that's garbage. Every country has to have its own identity and work out their own issues, whether it's Canada, USA, Mexico, you name it. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree with you. I don't like when people really jump on those bandwagons and say, oh, let's start playing Spain. Oh, now it's Germany. I agree with you. But what's interesting, at least from the U.S. national team perspective, and I think we can look at this, not only because Jurgen Klinsmann is a former German national team coach and former German player and is now in the U.S., but I think the characteristics of the German player are so similar to the U.S. player that I think that is definitely a model we want to pay careful attention to. Maybe not mimic, but we can pay careful attention to. Because, number one, the organization of the country, the U.S., Canada, were as organized as Germany. The type of athlete produced by our countries, similar to the type of player coming out of Germany. The mentality, that fighting spirit, the never giving up attitude, that's similar to what they have in Germany. So there are a lot of traits there. The work rate during a game, that you'll work and work and work, and that's what you see out of the German players. I think U.S. and Canada can aspire to being like Germany and seeing that kind of style can get success. No big stars, not necessarily having major talents like a James Rodriguez, but you have 11 players who are all at a high level in terms of their athleticism and their talent, and I think that's where we need to get Canada and the U.S. We need to develop players that are technically as proficient as the Germans, because then I think everything else works itself out in terms of the mentality, the physicality, the athleticism. So, look, you're right. You just can't flip the switch and say, okay, let's play like them, and then let's play like them.
The last point on the World Cup, and then we'll move quickly, Simon, to MLS. And to me, this is the big elephant in the room, and I'm sick and tired of FIFA not dealing with this. My heart was aching. I was so in shock watching Kramer of Germany making his way back onto the pitch after we all saw this young man was concussed. We saw it with Mascherano. Why in the world don't they do like they do in hockey and send these players to a quiet room, have a neutral doctor assess what's going on, and then let them out? I was sitting with my son, Simon. I looked at my son and my wife. I said, I'm scared for this man if he goes back in. I seriously believe something tragic is going to happen.
That's what you need. You need a tragedy. FIFA will not. The clubs, the teams, the coaches, players, they will not change their thinking unless a tragedy happens or unless a lawsuit is filed. Let's be honest. That's what's really going to move people to establishing protocols that need to be respected. I think in the U.S. we're setting the example, but for the rest of the world to really feel that in their conscience when these things happen, it's going to have to be an extreme circumstance, I think, that's going to have to wake everyone up. And Kramer almost got to that in the World Cup final. Lucky for him, it didn't turn out to be that bad. But he did forget. He came out after saying he forgot everything that happened up to that point. But it's going to have to take, I think, an extreme circumstance, unfortunately.
I'm sad to say, that this is what's possibly going to happen. I agree with you wholeheartedly. Simon, just before we let you go very quickly, we appreciate your time. Let's touch upon MLS comings and goings very quickly. We know of Kaká going to Orlando City, Robinho possibly there too. This is great for the league. You're starting to hear more and more names. This is fantastic, and I think this is what the league needs. Do you believe that they need more players that are not in the last stages of their career to bring more to the table here?
Agreed. I think Robinho and Kaká are at the perfect stage of their career. Look, they were competitive at the highest level in Italy, and I will take that any day of the week. And Kaká is still, he may not have gotten selected for Brazil's national team, and neither did Robinho, but I think both of them are that high-quality player. And look, to find a guy like Kaká and Robinho, who are eccentric, charismatic, can speak multiple languages, and have that kind of play that excites people. That's why you spend the big money on a big player to bring him to the league. And they bring that. I think a lot of times teams have gone for players that are more maybe conservative in the way they play, that are more modest in terms of their star power. But I love signings like those. They really energize the audience here. So, yeah, now the question is, how many of those guys are out there? Yeah. I think Kaká and Robinho, if Orlando can land those two, I'm not sure there were two players out there that are better at filling that void of star power, great talent, and they've done a tremendous job. If they can land Robinho and have a double Brazilian presence for a team that wants to also make an impact in the Brazilian market, and in Orlando the Brazilian market is a big one, I think there's no better move a team has made going into their first season.
And you're bang on, Simon. I spoke to someone last week in Italy in regards to Gilardino, and they have spoken to him, and he is shaking his head, wondering why he didn't take that offer from TFC and make his way over here, because now we know what has transpired with that situation. He was holding out to play for the Azzurri, hoping he would get selected. He didn't, and that's where it's at now. Very quickly, Simon, your surprise in the East and in the West. To me, I am surprised at DC United, but should I be? A lot of veterans picked up in the offseason, signings, trades. They've really made themselves a strong, competitive team. And to me in the West, really surprised by how Portland has fallen. Your thoughts?
Look, I'm with you. DC is a surprise on the positive side in the East. I think Toronto, for the most part, is also a positive one for me. I did not see them coming together as quickly as they have. And it's a pleasure. They know they have the ability, the resourcefulness to come up with goals when they need to. Defoe has been fantastic. I thought it would take him more time to get going, and we've not seen the best of Bradley. So Toronto, I think, look out for them. On the negative side, New England. You have to see New England and Columbus. They're really struggling, and they can't get it together. On the West, from a positive standpoint, to me, Seattle is because Seattle, they've always been burdened with the expectation, and this year they're actually producing, and they're playing good soccer. I didn't expect it out of this with a lame duck head coach in Ziggy Schmidt, who was in his final year of his contract. The signs were all pointing towards maybe a season where the whole thing collapses. They pull it together. And then on the positive side as well, Chivas USA. Wilmer Cabrera, against all odds, that team is coming together, proving competitive. I think they're going to nick one of those final playoff spots. Then on the negative side, Portland Timbers. I think the loss of Ryan Johnson, the loss of Rodney Wallace, who's only recently come back, that's impacted them. They lost that power, that dynamic nature of their game that made them such a pleasure to watch last year. But still, hey, half a season is left here, Anthony. There's a lot of stories still to be told.
Absolutely. It's been a blast once again. Simon Borg of MLSsoccer.com. Really